Welcome to the Eden Podcast, where we true the verse of Genesis 3:16, and we discover that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way.
Welcome to the Eden Podcast. I'm Bruce C.E. Fleming, Executive Director of the True 316 Foundation. Our website is tru316.com. And my wife and I, Dr. Joy Fleming, have been traveling in Europe, where we have been investigating different translations in different languages of Genesis 2 and 3 and related passages. We've had a wonderful time at a Christian conference and joined 10,000 believers at a summer camp conference with speakers and tents and meetings for young people and children and family members. Fantastic time together. But we've been disappointed from time to time. In fact, many points along the way as people have talked about the Garden of Eden and talked about the negative things that they find in their translations on the Garden of Eden. They seem to feel that God is fine and wonderful and loving and creative and relational in Genesis chapter 2 on the way into the Garden of Eden. But then they say, oh, we don't know that God of Genesis chapter 3 is harsh and vindictive and unfair and curses everybody and everything and then throws them out of the Garden of Eden. He just put them in and they're so negative. They seem to think that God cursed 3 times or 4 times or even more times. They say he cursed the serpent, he cursed the woman, he cursed the man, he cursed the ground, and maybe he cursed more things. And it's terrible the effect this has on even other passages in the Bible and in the New Testament in the Bible and in some of those key passages that we're so concerned about. So what I'd like to do is to take us through the 4 Eden insights as an introduction or a review, depending on where you are in your process. I'd like to encourage you to consider Season 1, Episode 1 of the Eden Podcast. Just go back, take a look, and we talk about the river that caught on fire. How does a river catch on fire? Well, it catches on fire because of the pollution that was floating along on top of the river. And the flames were 5 stories high off the river. Likewise, in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, there's been pollution put on top of the words, the Hebrew words, the original inspired words of God's talking to the woman in the Garden of Eden. And that pollution has caught fire, has caused flames, has burned many, and that pollution needs to be removed. So let's look at all of Genesis 2 and 3 and 4 key insights. Because God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way in the Garden of Eden. And that has a big influence on how we should understand what's in the rest of the New Testament passages on women and men. There's confusion about the Garden of Eden in part because there are 4 Eden insights that people miss in reading Genesis 2 to 3. Eden Insight 1, there were 2 wonderful relationships in the Garden of Eden. Eden Insight 2, when the man and woman ate the forbidden fruit, they did so with different motives. Eden Insight 3, God judged the 2 rebels with a 6-point rebuke and 1 curse each. Interestingly enough, most people misidentify who those 2 rebels were. And Eden Insight 4, God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way. Eden Insight 1. Did you know the Bible chapters on the Garden of Eden, Genesis 2 to 3, are written out in a bell-shaped pattern called a chiasm? The high point of this pattern is found in the center. On either side are parallel sections. Section A starts with coming in to the garden. Section A prime ends with going out of the garden. There are other patterns in this passage. Why is this important? Well, because the word patterns convey meaning, just as the meanings of the actual words themselves do. We can learn a lot from the word patterns found in Genesis 2 to 3. Genesis 2 reveals there were 2 positive relationships, the horizontal relationship between the first 2 human beings and the vertical relationship between the humans and God. The man and the woman had a wonderful relationship with one another. According to Genesis 2:25, they were naked and unashamed. In Genesis 2:25, we see the wonderful relationship of the man and woman. Eden Insight 2, did you know the first human beings didn't fall? They were attacked by the serpent enemy. Jesus said that enemy was a liar and a murderer from the beginning, John 8:44. The enemy's first lie was to disguise himself as a serpent. He was a glorious chief of the angels, but that's not how he appeared to them. That was his first lie. Then he used irony and cynicism to question God's good intent and clear command. Finally, he flatly contradicted God's word and presented himself as knowing more than God did. When both humans ate, they received the punishment for death for eating, but each ate from different motivations. The woman ate thinking it was good, but she'd been deceived. Genesis 3:13 and 1 Corinthians 11:3 explain this. The man ate going against God's word, following the example of the rebellious enemy serpent. The man was not deceived, we learn in 1 Timothy, but willfully disobeyed. Thus he was a first-degree eater, and she was a second-degree eater. When you have first-degree murder and second-degree murder, there's a difference in motivation, a difference in judgment. The result is someone is killed in both cases, but there's a difference in degree. In this case, in the Garden of Eden, both of them ate and both of them died as a result of that. But they had different motivations, and God is going to judge them differently as we go through Genesis chapter 3. We'll look into that in Genesis. Well, he took this into account, especially with the woman and the woman in 3:16 and the man in 18 to 24. We've put this together in a book. We call it the Book of Eden. In 8 clear chapters filled with helpful stories and illustrations, we teach the positive message of Eden through studying the Hebrew word patterns and word meanings in the Book of Eden, Genesis 2 to 3. It's available on Amazon as an ebook, as a paperback, and it's available on Audible as an audiobook, the Book of Eden. Eden Insight 3, God judged the two rebels, the serpent enemy and the man, with extra punishment because of the purposefulness with which they acted. So who are the two rebels? A lot of people think, oh, it's Adam and Eve. No, it's the serpent and the man. God spoke to each of these two using the same 6-point pattern. He spoke to the serpent in 3:14 to 15 and to the man in 3:17 to 19. And it's an amazing observation that my wife, Dr. Joy Fleming, made, that there is a 6-point pattern that God uses in each case for each of these rebels. These 6 points pop out of the Hebrew text, and they show a parallel relationship between these two individuals in the Garden of Eden. And as we think about who they were and what they did, we notice that these were the two rebels that disobeyed God on purpose. This word pattern conveys meaning. It's obvious that these two rebels were parallel in their thoughts and actions. And in this table, we talk about God's speech in both cases. So the 6 points to the serpent enemy are: 1, because you; 2, cursed is; 3, object of the curse; 4, the nature of the curse; 5, the duration of the curse, all the days of your life; and 6, there's a repeated verb in verse 15. It ends the section. I'll just mention it. It's shuf, shuf. Then to the man, starting with verse 17, oh, here's the pattern again. Because you, cursed is, and there's the object of the curse, in this case, the ground. Then there's the nature of the curse, the duration of the curse, all the days of your life, and a repeated verb that sounds an awful lot like the first one, shuv, shuv. In God's words to the woman in 3:16, none of these 6 points were spoken to her. And so this is where a word pattern jumps out and says, wait a minute, these three are not the same. God is not doing the same thing. He didn't curse the serpent and then curse the woman and then curse the man. No, he treated the man and the serpent in one way, and he treated the woman in another way. And it looks like it's because these first and third speeches are to rebels, and the second one is to a different kind of an eater, a second degree eater. Insight 4, in Eden, God promised the woman in her battle with the enemy serpent and promised victory with a two-part announcement of Genesis 3:15 to 16 of the good news of a coming deliverer or seed. A lot of people think that the entire proto-evangelium, the first announcement of the good news, is only found in verse 15, but that's not right. It's introduced in 3:15 and completed in 3:16. In Genesis 3:16, line 1, God takes action in two ways. He tells the woman she will certainly have sorrowful toil in field work, and he confirms to her the promise of a deliverer that she would certainly have conception. Now, this is clear in the English translation. Well, there's a lot of translations that don't make it clear. God takes action in two ways in the Hebrew text. And the King James and New King James translations show that. They say, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception, your X and your Y. But many translations say, no, it's not this one and that one. It's a different thing. And they combine these two words and they make up a new one and they say, I'm going to greatly multiply your pain in childbirth, which has the effect of, if you look at it, it looks like a curse. And a lot of people take it that way. And then they say, well, wait a minute, if there was a curse on the serpent and there's a curse on the woman, then how are those two alike? See what's going on? Instead of the word pattern that links the serpent and the man, they think because of the mistranslation that the passage links the serpent and the woman. And then they put that into the context of childbirth, and it really denigrates the concept of the announcement of the good news that she's going to bear the Messiah. Now, who would like to denigrate the concept of the Messiah that's going to come? There is an enemy, and God even talks about that in the earlier verses. He says, I'm confirming I will put enmity between the two of you. We talk about that more in the book of Eden. In line 2 of 3:16, now let me just back up a second. In line 1, God takes action in two ways. Then in lines 2, 3, and 4, he does not take action anymore. So we're not introducing new things. We're not introducing any kind of a judgment or a promise or action by God. It all happens in line 1. There's a mistake people make, and they say, well, there's two halves to the passage in 3:16. The first half is the first two lines, and the second half is the last two lines. Already they've made a mistake. They've missed that God takes action in the two ways. There's good news and bad news. Just like it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's an entire good, bad, good, bad, good, bad passage pattern going on through Genesis chapter 3. Well, in Genesis 3:16, line 1, God took action in two ways, telling the woman she would certainly have sorrowful toil in field work, just like the man would, and confirming to her the promise of a deliverer in that she would certainly have conception. Now, in line 2 of 3:16, God explains she will have grief in raising children. It doesn't say physical pain necessarily in that verse. It's talking about grief. Now, how did she have grief after leaving the Garden of Eden? Well, she had Cain, and he was rebellious. He mouthed off to God. He decided to do his own kind of offering in his own way. He's becomes a murderer of his brother, and the offspring of Cain it's just full of sinners as you keep reading through Genesis chapter 4. In line 3, God observes that she still has affection for her husband. He looks at her heart and he says, your desire is for your husband. Of course, they were on their honeymoon in the Garden of Eden bed and breakfast. They were doing fine. And she still has desire for her husband, affection. But in line 4, God warns her, well, good news in line 3, but bad news in line 4. The man, his desires are different. He desires to sinfully rule over her. God doesn't say to the man, you go rule over her now. or keep ruling over her. There was never that case. They were both created in God's image, and the man and the woman together were to rule over all of creation, but not over each other. God ruled over each of them equally. So God warns the woman in line 4 that the man intends to sinfully rule over her, and he does in 3:20 when he takes her name and says, "You're no longer the other Adam. I'm one Adam. You're two Adam. Or we're both Adams. We're both human beings," as God says in Genesis 5:2. Instead, he says, "I'm going to name you now, just like I named the animals that I ruled over before you got to the Garden of Eden. I'm going to rule over you, and I'm going to impose a new name on you. I'm going to call you." It doesn't make much difference what the name is. The fact is, he's ruling over her already before they get out of the Garden of Eden. But in these verses, God doesn't curse Eve. He doesn't curse Adam. He curses the ground because of the man. And he doesn't limit the woman in any way. There is another word pattern we really haven't talked about yet, and that is the linchpin. In this diagram that I have on the screen here, God says in 3:16, "I'm going to greatly multiply your toil, your itzabone," and that links down to 3:17. "Cursed is the ground, in toil you shall eat of it." So they both work the ground with their hands. They both have this sorrowful toil. So one elements of the linchpin links down, and the other element is "and your conception," and that links back up to 3:15, where God uses the word seed or offspring. You have to have 2 points to have a complete linchpin. There is a parallel linchpin over in Genesis chapter 2. And now there's one here in Genesis chapter 3. There's one in A and there's one in A prime. Sadly, many translations give their readers a different message. These translations don't show the 2 Hebrew words that mean sorrowful toil, itzabon, and conception, heron. Instead, they give their readers a mistranslation, that of pain in childbirth. Well, it's great to even dive deeper into this Eden passage. The main thing is to true the verse. Just if you're constructing a house and you get the window, you get the window a bit out of true. It's not quite horizontal. It's not quite vertical. You need to true the window. In this case, we want to true the verse to correspond with the vertical and the horizontal, with the word for word, with the line 1 and the lines 2, 3, and 4 in Genesis 3:16. And once we do, then we begin to say, well, these are positive insights on Eden. God loves them. He's just. He's faithful. He blesses the woman. He doesn't curse the man because of his rebellion. He curses the ground. There's just so much good and so much proper in the way God acts, and we can love him for that, and we can trust him for that. We are the True 316 Foundation. Our website's true316.com. That's TRU316.com, and we spread the positive news of Eden based on the words and word patterns of the biblical text. Joy Fleming, PhD and PSYD, is co-founder and former professor of Old Testament studies. She's also a full-time licensed psychologist. In her doctoral research on the Hebrew text of Genesis 2-3, Dr. Joy Fleming showed that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way. She's the author of Man and Woman in Biblical Unity, Theology from Genesis 2-3. I'm Bruce C.E. Fleming. I have my DEA from the University of Strasbourg, France. I'm the co-founder, and I'm a former academic dean and professor of practical theology. I'm the executive director of the True 316 Foundation, a speaker and host right here on the Eden podcast, and I'm the author of the Eden book series. There's 4 of them, starting with the Book of Eden on Genesis 2-3. You can contact us. Give me a call, 612-229-0007, or email me, Bruce at TRU316.com. Here's a little bit of overview. We have now hit 300 episodes on the Eden podcast. You can listen to the Eden podcast, or you can watch us on YouTube. Simply go to TRU316 or On YouTube, search The Eden Podcast. You can read the Eden book series. Book 1 is on Genesis 2 to 3. That's called the Book of Eden. Book 2 is on Ephesians 5 and 6. That's called Beyond Eden. Book 3 is on 1 Timothy 2 to 3. That's called Back to Eden. And Book 4 is on 1 Corinthians 11, 14, and 1 Peter 3, and that's called Because of Eden. They're available today on Amazon. We also do workshops. Each workshop uses, as a workbook, one of the 4 Eden books. And you can take the Eden workshop. You can sign up for that today, or the other workshops that you're interested in. Simply go to true316.com/workshop. Well, we celebrate these 300 episodes together. We stress the positive insights of Eden. We thank you for your support. There are people that are now true partners. Simply go to true316.com/partner.
True 316 Foundation is the home of the Eden Podcast. Join us for $3.16 a month or more. Let's true the verses on the key passages on women and men. Go to true316.com/partner. True 316 is strengthening and encouraging many, and we're getting stories every day of lives changed through our ministry. We're the home of the Eden Podcast, and we're getting the word out that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way. Our volunteer help is wonderful, and we grow stronger with each new true partner who gives to the True 316 Foundation so that we can cover the costs to do the technical work of the Eden Podcast, to coordinate our True School workshops like the 2-week Eden workshop on Genesis 2 and 3, and to make the True 316 Foundation function in its outreach to scholars and students around the world. You can give now with a one-time gift. And better still, you can join now and become a monthly donor. We call our monthly donors our true partners. Please join now by going to true316.com/partner.